The emergency klaxons screamed through every corridor of the massive space station, floating above Centauri Prime. Ambassador Krill's forearms trembled as he rushed toward the council chamber, his blue skin pale with fear, the reports coming in from the outer rim were beyond horrifying. 12 civilizations had sent their finest warships to face the enemy, they called the Devourers. Not a single vessel had returned. The enemy consumed everything in their path like a cosmic plague, leaving empty space where entire star systems once thrived. Billions of lives had been snuffed out in mere weeks. The circular chamber buzzed with frantic conversations in dozens of languages. Representatives from across the galaxy huddled in small groups, their faces showing the same expression of helpless terror. The mighty Dracorian Empire, which had ruled 1,000 worlds for millennia, was retreating behind defensive lines. The Crystalline Vorthan Collective, masters of energy manipulation, had abandoned 3 entire sectors without firing a shot. Admiral Thorn entered the chamber with heavy steps. His gray uniform bore the insignia of the Altarian Navy, the most respected military force in known space. But today, even his weathered face showed defeat. The holographic display flickered to life above the central platform, showing tactical readouts that made several ambassadors gasp in horror. "The numbers are final," Thorn announced, his voice echoing through the silent chamber. Fleet Group Alpha engaged the enemy at the Kepler Junction. All 2,000 ships were destroyed within 4 hours. Fleet Group Beta attempted a flanking maneuver at the Rigel system. Complete annihilation in 6 hours. Fleet Group Gamma tried a defensive position at the Vega Nebula. They lasted 3 hours. The silence that followed was deafening. Ambassador Vel of the Centauran Republic stood slowly, her tentacles quivering with barely controlled panic. "How is this possible? Our shields can withstand supernovas. Our weapons can crack planets in half. What manner of technology do these creatures possess?" Thorn's expression grew even grimmer. "That's the problem, Ambassador. It's not technology as we understand it. Our sensors can barely detect their ships. They seem to exist partially outside normal space-time. Every weapon we've used simply passes through their hulls like they're not even there. But when they attack, our ships just disappear. No explosion, no debris, they're simply gone." A reptilian delegate from the outer colonies hissed in frustration. "Then we evacuate the core worlds and flee to the far galaxies. Better to preserve our civilizations than face extinction." "There's nowhere to run," Thorn replied grimly. "Our long-range scouts report similar entities emerging in the Andromeda galaxy and beyond. Whatever these things are, they're not limited to our region of space. They're everywhere, and they're all moving toward populated systems." The chamber erupted in panicked discussions. Some delegates demanded immediate evacuation protocols. Others called for desperate last-stand defenses around their homeworlds. A few suggested attempting communication with the Devourers, though no one had any idea how to contact beings that existed partially outside reality. Ambassador Krill found himself thinking of old legends and half-forgotten reports. During his years as a diplomatic attaché, he had encountered many strange species on the galactic frontier. Most were quickly integrated into the Council or ignored if they posed no threat. But there had been one species that consistently troubled Council observers. "What about the humans?" he said quietly. The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence felt different. Several delegates exchanged nervous glances. The humans were a young species from a small blue planet on the edge of explored space. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel within the past century, making them barely more advanced than pre-spaceflight civilizations by Council standards, but the reports about human behavior were disturbing. They seemed incapable of peaceful coexistence even among their own kind. Their brief contact with Council forces had resulted in several unfortunate incidents where human vessels had attacked ships many times their size and technological sophistication. The humans had actually won some of those engagements through tactics that Council military experts considered crude but surprisingly effective. The humans? Ambassador Vel's tentacles coiled in disgust. They're barbarians who haven't even mastered basic energy manipulation? What could such primitives possibly offer in a crisis of this magnitude? Admiral Thorne frowned thoughtfully. He remembered reading classified reports about human military encounters. While their technology was indeed primitive by Council standards, their approach to warfare was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They seemed to view conflict not as a regrettable necessity, but as a natural state of existence to be studied and perfected. They fight differently than we do, Thorne said slowly. Our battles follow established protocols. We use overwhelming force applied efficiently and cleanly. The humans approach combat like it's some kind of art form. They use deception, unpredictable. Tactics and weapons designed specifically to cause maximum damage rather than clean elimination. A crystalline delegate shimmered with indignation. Exactly why they're unsuitable for civilized warfare. Their methods are chaotic and barbaric. But Ambassador Krill was remembering more details from the classified files. Human vessels were built differently than Council ships, where galactic civilizations focused on elegant designs that maximized shield efficiency and energy weapon output. Human ships looked like flying weapons platforms. Every surface bristled with different types of armaments, as if the humans couldn't decide on a single effective weapon system and had simply installed everything they could think of. Perhaps. Their chaos is exactly what we need, Krill suggested. The Devourers have defeated every conventional military force we've deployed. They seem to understand our tactics and technology well enough to counter everything we throw at them. But they've never encountered humans before. The debate that followed was intense and desperate. Many delegates argued that involving such a primitive species would only result in meaningless casualties. Others pointed out that they were already facing extinction, so any additional help, no matter how unlikely to succeed, was worth attempting. Finally, Admiral Thorne made the decision that would change galactic history. We send an envoy to Earth. Not to recruit allies, but to inform them of the threat. If they choose to help, we accept whatever forces they can provide. If nothing else, their sacrifice might buy us time to develop new countermeasures. The vote was close, but the measure passed. As the delegates dispersed to arrange evacuation plans for their homeworlds, none of them truly believed that the primitive humans could accomplish what 12 advanced civilizations had failed to achieve. They were simply grasping at any possible hope in their darkest hour. The message torpedo launched toward Earth carried a desperate plea for help, though its senders had no real faith in the response they might receive from the violent primitives at the galaxy's edge. The routine patrol around Jupiter's outer moons had been going smoothly until the sensors detected something that shouldn't exist. Lieutenant Davis stared at the readings on his console aboard the Earth vessel Endeavour, trying to make sense of the impossible data streaming across his screen. "Sir, we've got an unknown contact approaching from outside the solar system," Davis reported to the bridge crew. "It's not broadcasting any identification signals, and it's moving at speeds that should tear apart any known spacecraft." "Commander." Reed moved to the sensor station with practiced calm. He had spent 15 years patrolling Earth's outer territories, and nothing surprised him anymore. Pirates, smugglers, and the occasional lost research vessel were common sights in the outer system. But this contact was different. The object was decelerating from near-light speed without showing any signs of the massive energy discharge such a maneuver should require. "Range and bearing?" Reed asked, studying the tactical display. 2 million kilometers and closing. "Sir, the energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. It's not using any propulsion system we recognize, and the hull composition doesn't match any known materials." Reed had been expecting this day for years. Earth's first contact protocols had been developed by military strategists who assumed aliens would eventually find humanity. The protocols were simple: establish communication, determine intent, and protect Earth's interests at all costs. The alien vessel materialized on the main viewer as a sleek crystal structure that seemed to bend light around itself. It was beautiful in an otherworldly way, but Reed's military instincts immediately cataloged potential weapon ports and defensive systems. To his trained eye, The alien ship looked more like an art project than a warship. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," the communications officer reported. "It's coming through on multiple frequencies simultaneously, and somehow our computers are translating it automatically," Reed nodded grimly. "If the aliens could override human translation systems without permission, they possess technology far beyond Earth's capabilities. Put it through." The main viewer shimmered, and a tall, crystalline being appeared on screen. Its form was vaguely humanoid, but composed entirely of what looked like living diamond. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate directly in the human brain. "Greetings, primitive species of the third planet," the being said with barely concealed condescension. "I am Envoy Quill of the Galactic Council. Your world has been identified as possessing rudimentary spaceflight capabilities, which qualifies you for emergency conscription under Council Emergency Protocol 7. Reed kept his expression neutral, though every word the alien spoke irritated him. "I'm Commander Reed of the Earth Defense Force. You're in Earth territorial space without permission. State your business or prepare to be escorted to the outer system boundary." Quill's crystalline features shifted in what might have been amusement. "Commander Reed, I believe you misunderstand the situation. Your species has been contacted by representatives of 12 advanced civilizations that have governed this galaxy for millions of years. We are not requesting permission to be here. We are informing you of your obligations." The bridge crew exchanged glances. Reed noticed several hands moving toward weapon controls. Earth's military had spent centuries fighting wars against enemies who considered themselves superior. The alien's tone was triggering every combat instinct his crew possessed. "What obligations?" Reed asked, his voice taking on the dangerous quiet that his subordinates recognized as a warning sign. Quill activated a holographic display that filled the bridge with images of space battles on an unimaginable scale. Thousands of ships engaged massive, dark entities that seemed to absorb light itself. The human crew watched in fascination as advanced alien vessels fired energy beams that could destroy continents, only to see their attacks pass harmlessly through enemy hulls. "The galaxy faces extinction at the hands of entities we call the Devourers," Quill explained. "They consume all matter and energy in their path, leaving empty space where star systems once existed. Our combined fleets have suffered total defeat in every engagement. Billions of lives have been lost." Reed studied the tactical data with professional interest. The alien formations looked impressive, but their tactics were predictable and rigid. Ships moved in perfect geometric patterns that would have been beautiful to observe but suicidal in actual combat. No wonder they were losing. "What does this have to do with Earth?" Reed asked. Quill's tone became even more condescending. "The Council requires every spacefaring species to contribute to the final defense of the galaxy. We understand that your primitive technology can offer little assistance, but even crude vessels can serve as useful distractions while more advanced forces attempt at strategic maneuvers." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Reed felt his crew's anger building. They had just been told that Earth was expected to sacrifice its ships and crews as cannon fodder for alien civilizations that considered humans barely worthy of notice. "Let me understand this correctly," Reed said slowly. "You want Earth to send our military forces to fight an enemy that has completely defeated 12 technologically superior civilizations, and you expect us to do this as a distraction while your more advanced forces attempt to win the battle?" Precisely," Quill replied, apparently missing the dangerous undertone in Reed's voice. "Your sacrifice will be remembered with appropriate honor, assuming any civilized beings survive to maintain such records." Reed turned to his communications officer. "Open a channel to Earth Defense Command, priority alpha encryption." The response came within minutes. Admiral Stone appeared on a secondary screen, his gruff face showing the exhaustion of a man who had been preparing Earth's defenses against unknown threats for decades. Reed quickly briefed his superior on the situation while Quill waited with obvious impatience. Stone listened to the report without interruption, occasionally studying the tactical data from the alien battles. When Reed finished, the Admiral was quiet for several seconds. His staff could be seen in the background, analyzing the information and running calculations. "Envoy Quill," Stone finally said, addressing the alien directly. "Let me see if I understand the tactical situation. You've been fighting these devourers using energy-based weapons and standard shield technology. Your ships operate in formation patterns that prioritize maximum firepower concentration. And despite overwhelming numerical and technological superiority, you've suffered complete defeats." "That is correct," Quill replied. "The Devourer's technology appears to operate outside known physical laws. Our weapons cannot harm them, and their attacks simply eliminate our vessels from existence." Stone exchanged a look with Reed that the alien couldn't interpret. Both humans were thinking the same thing. The aliens were fighting a war using tactics that would have been considered outdated on Earth 300 years ago. "We'll need time to analyze this information and consult with our military strategists," Stone said diplomatically. "Earth will send a response within 24 hours. After Quill's ship departed to wait for Earth's answer, Stone called an emergency meeting of the Defense Council. Military leaders from every major Earth nation gathered in the secure conference room beneath Colorado's Rocky Mountains. The holographic displays showed the alien battle footage on endless repeat as human strategists identified flaw after flaw in galactic military doctrine. "They fight like it's a parade," General Martinez observed. "Perfect formations, predictable movements, no adaptation to enemy tactics." "Look at their weapons," added Admiral Chun from the Pacific Fleet. "Pure energy discharge. No kinetic systems, no area denial weapons, no psychological warfare components. They're trying to fight a clean war against an enemy that doesn't play by rules?" Stone nodded grimly. "The question is whether we want to get involved in an alien war that doesn't seem to have anything to do with Earth's security." "Sir," Reed interjected from his position on the Outer System Patrol, "I think we need to consider the possibility that Earth's survival depends on stopping these devourers before they reach our territory. If they're consuming entire galaxies, it's only a matter of time before they turn their attention to us." The debate continued for hours, but the conclusion was inevitable. Earth would send a fleet to assist the Galactic Council, not out of altruism, but because human military doctrine demanded meeting threats as far from home as possible. And if the process happened to demonstrate human military superiority to a galaxy of condescending aliens, that would be an acceptable bonus. The Omega Nebula had never seen such a gathering of warships. Thousands of vessels from across the galaxy formed defensive lines around the ancient star cluster that housed the Galactic Council's most important strategic installations. The colorful gas clouds that gave the nebula its beauty now served as backdrop for what every commander present believed would be the final battle for galactic civilization. Admiral Thorne watched the tactical displays from the bridge of his flagship Determination. The assembled fleet represented the last military assets 12 civilizations could muster. Sleek Centaurian destroyers took positions alongside massive Dracorian battleships. Vorthan energy cruisers formed support squadrons with crystalline Altarian carriers. It was the most powerful military force ever assembled in galactic history. And Thorne was certain it wouldn't be enough. The retreat from the Outer Rim had been a strategic disaster. Every defensive position had fallen within hours of contact with the Devourers. Military bases that should have held for months were consumed in minutes. Entire colonial sectors had been evacuated so hastily that millions of civilians were still fleeing toward the galactic core in overcrowded transport vessels. "Sir, long-range sensors are detecting spatial distortions at the nebula's edge," reported his tactical officer. "The enemy is beginning their approach." Thorne felt his heart skip in synchronized rhythm. The Devourers always announced their presence. The same way, reality itself began to bend around their vessels before they fully materialized in normal space. Scientists theorized that the entities existed partially in dimensions beyond standard spacetime, which explained why conventional weapons couldn't harm them. "All ships, battle stations," Thorne transmitted to the fleet. "Remember your formations and maintain firing discipline. If we're going to die today, let's make it cost them something." The first Devourer ships emerged from hyperspace like nightmares given form. They were massive biomechanical constructs that seemed to absorb light and energy from their surroundings. Where normal ships had clean lines and purposeful design, the Devourer vessels looked grown rather than built. Organic curves merged with mechanical components in ways that hurt to look at directly. "My God," whispered the tactical officer. "There are hundreds of them." More ships continued to emerge from the dimensional rifts. Each vessel was unique, as if the Devourers had absorbed and transformed the technology of every species they had encountered. Thorn could see design elements that reminded him of Altarian hull plating, Centaurian weapon ports, and Dracorian shield generators, all twisted into alien configurations. The Galactic fleet opened fire as soon as the enemy came within range. Energy beams that could vaporize asteroids lanced through space in brilliant displays of destructive power. Quantum torpedoes capable of cracking planets streaked toward their targets in perfect formation. The combined firepower was enough to sterilize entire solar systems. Every shot passed through the Devourer ships as if they weren't there. "No effect," reported weapons control across dozens of ships simultaneously. "All weapons are phasing through. Enemy hulls, no damage registered." But the Devourers were not similarly limited. Dark energy beams erupted from their organic weapon ports, and wherever those beams touched galactic vessels, matter simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris, no energy discharge. Ships and crews vanished from reality as if they had never been built. The Centaurian destroyer Swift Current disappeared under enemy fire. The massive Dracorian battleship Iron Fang winked out of existence while its crew was still transmitting damage reports. Squadron after squadron of carefully positioned defenders were erased from space faster than tactical computers could update their status boards. "All ships execute fallback pattern 7, Thorn ordered, watching his carefully planned battle lines collapse under enemy fire. "Concentrate remaining forces around the command cluster." The retreat was a disaster. Devourer vessels moved through space with impossible agility, changing direction without regard for momentum or inertia. They flowed around the galactic formations, like water around rocks, consuming ships from angles that should have been protected by overlapping defensive fields. Within 2 hours, 3/4 of the galactic fleet had been eliminated. The survivors huddled in a defensive sphere around Thorn's flagship, maintaining a desperate perimeter that shrank every minute. Enemy vessels circled like predators, picking off isolated ships and testing the weakening defensive lines. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the outer perimeter," his communications officer reported. "It's the human fleet." Thorn had forgotten about the primitive reinforcements promised by Earth. In the chaos of battle preparation, the small human contingent had seemed insignificant compared to the massive galactic armada. But now, as his civilization faced extinction, even token support felt precious. "Put them through," he ordered. The main viewer displayed the bridge of a human vessel that looked more like a mobile weapons platform than a proper warship. Every surface bristled with different types of armaments, and the crew moved with the efficient precision of professional soldiers. The human commander was a stern-faced man who studied the tactical situation with calculating eyes. "This is Admiral Stone of the Earth Combined Fleet," the human announced. "We're reading massive casualties in your formation. What's the tactical situation?" "Admiral Stone, I'm afraid you've arrived just in time to witness the end of galactic civilization," Thorn replied wearily. "The enemy is immune to all our weapons, and our ships can't withstand their attacks. I recommend you withdraw immediately. There's no point in adding human casualties to this disaster." Stone's expression didn't change as he reviewed the sensor data streaming from Thorn's ship. Other human officers could be seen in the background, analyzing the battle reports and discussing tactical options in voices too quiet for the transmission to pick up. "Understood, Admiral Thorn. We'll take the situation under advisement." The transmission ended, and Thorn assumed the humans would follow the example of several other species and retreat to defensive positions around their homeworlds. It was the logical choice when facing an enemy that had already proven unstoppable, but the human ships didn't withdraw. Instead, they moved deeper into the battle zone, taking positions that placed them directly between the retreating galactic forces and the advancing devourers. Their formations were unlike anything Thorn had seen: loose, adaptive groups that could separate and reform as tactical conditions changed. "Sir, the humans are requesting tactical data on enemy movements," his communications officer reported. "They want real-time sensor feeds from all surviving ships?" Thorn was too exhausted to argue. If the humans wanted to commit suicide in some primitive display of courage, sharing sensor data wouldn't make their deaths any more meaningless. He authorized the data transfer and watched as human vessels began moving in patterns that made no tactical sense according to standard galactic military doctrine. The Devourers noticed the new arrivals and began shifting their formation to engage the human fleet. Several enemy vessels broke off from their systematic destruction of galactic forces and moved to eliminate what they probably considered a minor distraction. "All human vessels, this is Admiral Stone," came the transmission on open frequencies. "Weapons free. Execute Protocol 7. Let's show these things how Earth fights wars." Thorn watched in fascination as the human vessels opened fire with weapons systems he didn't recognize. Instead of clean energy beams, the humans used kinetic projectiles accelerated to incredible velocities. Rather than trying to penetrate enemy shields, they employed gravitational weapons that twisted space-time around their targets. Most shocking of all, they deployed devices that seemed designed to disrupt biological functions on a cellular level. For the first time since the war began, Devourer vessels showed signs of damage. "Impossible," breathed Thorn's tactical officer. "How are their primitive weapons affecting targets our most advanced systems can't touch?" The answer became clear as Thorn watched the human tactics unfold. Where galactic civilizations had developed weapons designed for clean, efficient destruction, humans had created systems specifically intended to cause maximum damage through any means necessary. They weren't trying to overpower Devourer defenses. They were attacking through methods the enemy had never encountered. The battle was far from over, but for the first time in months, the forces of galactic civilization had hope. Chaos erupted across the battlefield as the first Devourer vessel actually took visible damage from human weapons fire. The massive biomechanical construct shuddered under the impact of kinetic projectiles that punched through whatever exotic defenses had protected it from galactic energy weapons. Dark fluid began leaking from puncture wounds in its organic hull sections. Admiral Stone stood calmly on the bridge of his flagship Defiance as damage reports streamed in from the enemy vessel. His weapons officers were already adjusting firing solutions based on the initial results. Unlike the galactic forces, human military doctrine emphasized rapid adaptation and continuous improvement of tactics during active combat. Target analysis. "Confirmed structural damage to enemy vessel 7, reported his tactical coordinator. "Kinetic penetrators are effective against biomechanical hull sections. Gravitational disruptors are causing spatial distortion around their propulsion systems." Stone nodded grimly. Earth's military had spent decades developing weapons specifically designed to fight enemies with unknown defensive capabilities. While other species perfected energy-based systems that could destroy known targets efficiently, humans had focused on creating weapons that would work against any conceivable opponent. "All ships implement firing pattern Delta 7, Stone commanded. "Focus on biological components first, mechanical systems second. Remember, these things are partially organic. Treat them like any other living target." The human fleet opened fire with a coordinated barrage that would have horrified the Galactic Council if they had understood what they were witnessing. Relativistic projectiles streaked through space at 90% of light speed, carrying simple chunks of depleted uranium that hit with the force of tactical nuclear weapons. Neural disruptor fields swept across enemy formations, designed to interfere with any biological nervous system, regardless of its alien origin. But the most devastating weapons in the human arsenal were ones that no civilized species had ever conceived of developing. Psychological warfare pods. deployed clouds of nanoscale devices that infiltrated enemy vessels and began broadcasting signals designed to induce fear, confusion, and despair in any thinking beings they encountered. The effects on the Devourer fleet were immediate and terrifying. Vessels that had moved with perfect coordination began erratic flight patterns. Some ships collided with their own allies as their navigation systems were disrupted by gravitational weapons. Others simply stopped moving entirely, as if their crews had been overwhelmed by emotions they had never experienced before. Admiral Thorne watched from his flagship in stunned amazement as human tactics systematically dismantled enemy formations that had seemed invincible moments earlier. His communications officer was frantically trying to understand how primitive human technology was accomplishing what advanced galactic weapons could not. "Sir, I'm reading massive neural activity disruption across the enemy fleet," the tactical officer reported. "Whatever the humans are doing, it's affecting the biological components of Devourer vessels on a fundamental level." The human fleet moved through the battle zone like predators stalking wounded prey. Their loose formations allowed individual ships to exploit weaknesses as they appeared, while maintaining mutual support against enemy counterattacks. It was a style of warfare that prioritized flexibility and aggression over the rigid tactical doctrines favored by galactic civilizations. Captain Blake commanded the human destroyer Vengeance from the center of the expanding battle. Her ship carried experimental weapons that Earth's military had developed specifically for fighting unknown alien threats. As Devourer vessels began targeting human ships, she deployed countermeasures that no galactic commander would have considered acceptable in civilized warfare. "Deploy the terror drones," Blake ordered as enemy fire began bracketing her position. "Let's see how these things handle some psychological pressure." The drones were small, fast, and designed for one purpose: to get inside enemy vessels and make their crews' lives as miserable as possible. They carried sonic weapons tuned to frequencies that induced nausea and disorientation in most known biological species. More importantly, they were programmed to target life support systems, command centers, and any other critical areas that would force enemy crews to fight for survival rather than focus on tactical objectives. The results were beyond anything the drone designers had hoped for. Devourer vessels that had shrugged off planet-killing energy weapons began taking erratic evasive action to avoid swarms of human devices no larger than shuttlecraft. Their formation integrity collapsed as individual ships prioritized self-preservation over coordinated tactics. "All ships advance and engage at close range," Stone commanded. "Remember, fear is just another weapon. Use it." The human fleet moved in for close-quarters combat using tactics that galactic military academies would have considered insane. Instead of maintaining safe distances and engaging with long-range weapons, human ships closed to ranges where their crews could see enemy vessel details on visual displays. At such distances, every weapon in their arsenal became devastatingly effective. Boarding pods launched from human vessels and attached themselves to Devourer hulls with magnetic clamps and molecular welding systems. The pods carried teams of human marines equipped with weapons designed for fighting inside alien ships. But more importantly, they carried devices that no other species had ever thought to deploy, biological warfare systems specifically designed to attack alien nervous systems and life support requirements. The psychological impact of boarding actions on the Devourer fleet was immediate and devastating. These entities had consumed entire star systems without ever facing an enemy willing to board their vessels and fight them directly. The concept of hand-to-hand combat inside their own ships was apparently so alien that it triggered panic responses throughout their fleet. Commander Torres led the boarding assault on a damaged Devourer vessel from her position on the Marine transport assault. Her teams carried weapons that combined traditional kinetic systems with biological agents designed to incapacitate rather than kill. The goal was not just to destroy enemy ships, but to capture intelligence about Devourer capabilities and intentions. Remember, these things might be partially biological. Torres transmitted to her assault teams as they prepared to breach enemy hulls, Standard biological warfare protocols are in effect. Gas masks, sealed suits, and assume everything you touch is toxic. The Marine assault teams found themselves fighting through corridors that seemed designed by nightmares. Organic walls pulsed with unknown energy patterns. Mechanical systems grew from the deck plating like metallic plants. The very air was thick, with particles that their sensors couldn't identify, but human Marines had trained for exactly these conditions. Earth's military had spent centuries preparing for warfare against unknown enemies in hostile environments. Every piece of equipment they carried had been tested against biological, chemical, and energy-based threats that might be encountered on alien vessels. The boarding actions succeeded beyond all expectations. Not only did human forces successfully penetrate Devourer ships, but they managed to disrupt enemy operations from within. Critical systems were sabotaged, command centers were captured, and biological components were subjected to psychological warfare techniques that apparently caused system-wide failures. From his position on the Defiance, Admiral Stone watched as the tide of battle shifted decisively in humanity's favor. Enemy vessels that had been immune to all galactic weapons were now suffering cascading failures as human tactics exploited weaknesses that no civilized species had thought to target. Sir, long-range sensors are detecting additional enemy formations. Approaching the battle zone, his tactical coordinator reported. It looks like they're calling in reinforcements. Stone studied the sensor readings with professional interest. The approaching enemy forces were larger than the original Devourer fleet, but he was no longer concerned about facing superior numbers. Human military doctrine had always emphasized quality over quantity, and the current battle was proving that superior tactics could overcome any technological advantage. "Signal the fleet," Stone commanded. "Prepare for Phase 2 operations. It's time to show these things what happens when you threaten Earth." Space itself seemed to tear apart as the main human battle fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Admiral Stone had been fighting with only the advance guard of Earth's military might. Now the full power of humanity's war machine materialized in the Omega Nebula like an answer to prayers no one dared speak aloud. The new arrivals dwarfed every other vessel in the battle zone. Where galactic ships were elegant and efficient, the human dreadnoughts looked like flying fortresses, built specifically for war. The flagship of the main fleet was a massive vessel called Prometheus that stretched over a kilometer in length and bristled with weapon systems that defied classification. Admiral Rivera commanded the Prometheus from a bridge that looked more like a military command center than a starship control room. Banks of tactical displays showed every aspect of the ongoing battle in real time. Her crew moved with the practiced efficiency of soldiers who had spent their entire careers preparing for exactly this type of engagement. "Admiral Stone, this is Rivera on the Prometheus. We're reading significant enemy casualties and defensive disruption in your engagement zone. Request permission to deploy strategic weapons packages." Stone smiled grimly as he watched the massive reinforcement fleet take positions around the battlefield. Each of the new arrivals carried weapon systems that Earth's military had developed in secret over the past 50 years, systems that other species would consider violations of every civilized warfare convention ever written. "Permission granted, Admiral Rivera. The enemy has proven vulnerable to biological and psychological warfare. Deploy everything we've got." The Prometheus and her sister ships began launching weapons that existed at the very edge of theoretical physics. Reality bombs were deployed throughout the enemy formation, devices that attacked the fundamental forces holding matter together at the quantum level. Where they detonated, space itself became unstable as the basic rules of reality were temporarily suspended. The effects on the Devourer fleet were immediate and catastrophic. Vessels that had existed partially outside normal spacetime were suddenly forced back into standard reality, where they became vulnerable to every human weapon system simultaneously. Ships that had been immune to galactic energy weapons found themselves taking damage from simple projectile systems as their exotic defenses collapsed. But the reality bombs were only the beginning of humanity's ultimate weapons package. Neural Plague missiles streaked through enemy formations, carrying biological agents specifically designed to attack any form of consciousness, regardless of its physical substrate. The missiles didn't need to penetrate enemy hulls. They simply needed to get close enough for their payloads to affect biological components through quantum entanglement effects. Captain Rodriguez watched from the bridge of the battleship Retribution as enemy vessels throughout the battlefield began showing signs of system-wide failures. Devourer ships that had moved with perfect coordination now displayed erratic behavior patterns, suggesting that their crews were experiencing severe psychological distress. Target the largest enemy vessels with gravity bombs, Rodriguez ordered. Let's see how they handle having their local space-time compressed into black hole densities. The gravity bombs were humanity's most terrifying weapons, devices that created localized gravitational fields intense enough to compress matter into neutron-dense formations. When they detonated near Devourer vessels, the enemy ships were stretched and twisted by tidal forces that no known technology could resist. From his flagship, Admiral Thorne of the Galactic Forces watched in horrified fascination as human weapons systematically destroyed enemy formations through methods that violated every principle of civilized warfare. The humans weren't just defeating the Devourers, they were terrorizing them with weapons that attacked existence itself. The most devastating weapon in the human arsenal was something they called a consciousness bomb. The device didn't destroy matter or energy. Instead, it attacked the quantum foundations of awareness and thought. When consciousness bombs detonated near Devourer vessels, the enemy crews simply stopped functioning as thinking beings. Their ships continued to exist, but became lifeless hulks drifting through space. Admiral Rivera coordinated the deployment of these ultimate weapons with cold precision. Her tactical staff had spent years studying theoretical methods for fighting enemies that might possess capabilities beyond human understanding. The consciousness bombs represented the culmination of that research, weapons designed to destroy not just the enemy's ability to fight, but their ability to exist as sentient beings. Deploy consciousness bombs in grid pattern 7, Rivera commanded. Full-spectrum neural disruption across the enemy fleet. Make sure nothing with a functioning brain survives this engagement. The bombs exploded in brilliant flashes that seemed to bend light around themselves. Where they detonated, Devourer vessels simply stopped moving. Their engines continued to run, their hulls remained intact, but the creatures inside had been reduced to mindless biological matter incapable of coordinated thought or action. The psychological impact on the remaining enemy forces was beyond anything human military planners had anticipated. The Devourers had conquered galaxies by consuming entire star systems. They had faced every type of resistance the universe could produce. But they had never encountered a species that fought wars by attacking the very concept of consciousness itself. Panic spread through the enemy fleet like wildfire. Ships that had maintained perfect formation for millennia began breaking ranks and fleeing in random directions. The disciplined advance that had consumed 12 galactic civilizations dissolved into chaos as individual vessels prioritized escape over tactical objectives. Captain Williams commanded the destroyer Nemesis as it pursued fleeing enemy vessels through the nebula's outer reaches. His ship carried hunter-killer drones specifically designed to track down and eliminate retreating enemies. But as he watched Devourer ships flee in all directions, he realized that something fundamental had changed in their behavior. "Sir, enemy vessels are broadcasting what appears to be distress signals," his communications officer reported. "The signals are being transmitted on frequencies we've never seen them use before." Williams studied the tactical display as more. Enemy ships broke off from combat and began desperate retreat maneuvers. The Devourers weren't just losing the battle. They were experiencing something they had apparently never encountered before. Genuine fear of an opponent they couldn't understand or defeat. The final phase of the human assault involved weapons that no other species had ever conceived of deploying. Existential bombs were launched toward the remaining Devourer formations, devices that attacked the philosophical foundations of reality itself. When they detonated, they created zones where the basic concepts of existence, time, and causality became uncertain. Enemy vessels caught in these existential fields simply faded from reality as if they had never existed. Not destroyed, not converted to energy, but erased from the universe on a level so fundamental that even their past actions became questionable. It was warfare conducted at the level of cosmic principles rather than mere physical destruction. The remaining Devourer fleet made a collective decision that stunned every observer in the battle zone. Rather than continuing to fight an enemy that attacked existence itself, they began emergency retreat procedures. Dimensional rifts opened throughout their formation as ships prepared to flee not just the battle, but this entire region of spacetime. Admiral Stone watched from the Defiance as enemy vessels began disappearing into hyperspace. The retreat wasn't tactical or strategic. It was the panicked flight of predators who had suddenly found themselves facing something even more dangerous than they were. "Sir, long-range sensors are tracking enemy vessels fleeing toward the Galactic Rim," his tactical coordinator reported. "They're not regrouping for another attack. They're leaving this galaxy entirely." The human fleet maintained combat readiness as the last Devourer vessels vanished into dimensional space. But it was clear that the immediate threat was over. The entities that had consumed entire star systems had been driven away by weapons that attacked not just their ships and crews, but the very foundations of their existence. In the aftermath, Admiral Thorne found himself staring at tactical displays that showed something impossible: a complete human victory against an enemy that had been utterly unstoppable against galactic forces. His communication systems were flooded with reports from across the galaxy. Devourer fleets that had been systematically consuming outer rim colonies were abandoning their conquests and fleeing toward deep space. "Admiral Stone," Thorne transmitted to the human flagship, "I don't understand how you accomplished what 12 advanced civilizations could not. Your weapons, your tactics, everything you've done here contradicts established military doctrine." Stone's response was delivered with the matter-of-fact tone of a professional soldier discussing routine operations. "Admiral Thorne, your civilizations developed weapons designed to fight clean wars against known enemies. Earth has spent centuries preparing to fight dirty wars against anything the universe might throw at us. The difference is that we've never assumed our enemies would follow rules or fight fair." The Galactic Fleet began recovery operations as human vessels maintained patrol patterns around the battle zone. But the real victory wasn't measured in destroyed enemy ships or tactical objectives achieved. The Devourers had learned something that would change their behavior throughout the universe. There were species too dangerous and unpredictable to safely attack. As news of the human victory spread across galactic communication networks, a new understanding began to emerge among civilized species. The primitive barbarians from the Outer Rim had demonstrated military capabilities that established galactic powers could barely comprehend. Earth was no longer a minor species to be ignored or patronized. The galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere in the deep darkness between stars, the surviving Devourers carried warnings about a species that fought wars by attacking existence itself.